Okay, that might have done it. Sound? Do you have sound? Okay, now do we have sound? Oh, I'm such a bad streamer. We do have sound now. So we do have sound? Okay, great. All right, so that was a terrible start. Okay, so here's where we are with the um, okay, I'm going to talk about the Republican convention. I'm going to talk about Trump's speech, and then I'll answer every question that you might have. But we're going to go through the speech first. Okay, I hope that doesn't bother anyone. So, Tucker's speech, Tucker Carlson was talking about how J.D. Vance's views are closer to Trump's than anyone else's. That's why he was picked. I think that might be some of it. I think that's part of it. I think it's also that he is from Ohio, which is right between Michigan and Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which is three of the most important battleground states. Okay. So, by the way, you all can see me, like the full me, or do you see anything else on the screen? Like, do you see the concurrent views and chat rate and views and that sort of thing, or just see a big picture of me? Because I'm not the greatest streamer, as you can tell. And what I see on the screen might be different than what you see. So I'm just asking that question. Thank you for answering that in advance. Okay, Eric Trump was talking about how a war that has no end and a war that we are funding. But, okay. It might be a war that has an end if you would just actually fund it properly, and funding rather than fighting is a lot better. Okay, Trump's speech. Let's talk about that. So he comes into Lee Greenwood's proud to be an American. There's nothing new there. He does that fairly often. It's unveiled with the large black and by the way, I have a bunch of notes here, pages of notes of what happened. So, okay. Large golden black Trump sign. It turned into a White House kind of background, so it looked like he's standing in front of the White House. I thought it was a nice look. He talked about a message of confidence, strength, and hope. Now that's really interesting because I put out in my polls about, like, what do you think Trump is going to sound like? Is he going to sound? Well, let me see if I can pull this up. Let me just look at this real quick. And because I did a follow-up poll, and it was also interesting. So the first poll said, okay, where is it? Okay, we're a few hours from Trump's acceptance speech at the Republican convention. What tone will he strike? Conciliatory, unifying to America got 8%. Now, it's not out of 100 here. 15% just wanted to see the results. So out of 85%. Conciliatory, 8%. Defiant, fighting, 19%. Toxic, unhinged got 51%. And an appeal to common man for votes, 7%. So clearly the winner was toxic and unhinged. And then afterwards, I put out three polls, one to Republicans, or one to the right, one to the left, and one to the center. And you saw the same kind of trends, generally speaking, with the toxic unhinged. But I think some folks were monkeying with the poll a little bit, adding to it. Just it seems a little odd, but the percentages were there. If you were on the right side of the spectrum, the toxic unhinged percentage was 27%. Okay, so that's down from the 51%. If you were on the left, it was 47%. That makes sense that the left would see it as more toxic unhinged. And 39% if you were in the middle. So that was kind of interesting to see how that played out. Okay. Across partisan lines. But to my mind, he sounded a lot more conciliatory than what he had previously. I'm not into the comments yet. I'll get to the comments after I work through the speech. Talked about discord in society that needs to be healed. I'm running to be president for all of America. All presidents say that kind of thing, given enough time to get into their speech. They want to try to say something unifying. Let me express my gratitude for the outpouring of love after the assassination attempt. And then he talked about the assassination attempt at some length. I felt safe because I had God on my side. Be careful with that kind of thing. That's for anyone. Just, if you're claiming God's on your side, Lincoln was talking about, he didn't claim that, but he hopes that he's on God's side. Okay, that's a more appropriate way of approaching that. I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Crowds started chanting, "Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are." Okay. I stand before you only by the grace of Almighty God. I rose my right arm and started shouting, "Fight, fight, fight." And they started going, "Fight, fight, fight, fight." And I was like, okay, this is going to the left's going to turn this into what looks like a Nazi rally or something like that. They were just pumped up that their guy wasn't killed. For the rest of my life, I'll be grateful to the crowd of patriots. And he mentioned Corey, the guy that was actually killed, and two others who were injured. And he talked about he had Corey, the firefighter's jacket there on the stage to honor him. I thought that was a nice touch. They raised $6.3 million for the families. They had a moment of silence for the families of those that were affected there. Okay. Then he gets into some other things. And I'm going to skip past most of this until we get to the point where, because I know that you're not interested in much of this. I thought that he was, I'm looking at the comments, Allison said he was on sedatives. He held onto the podium, no usual crazy hand gestures. Maybe he was on sedatives. At least if he was on sedatives, he had a rationale with pain from the shot. But maybe that was it. I'm not suggesting that was it. But he was far calmer. I mean, for a Trump speech, it was something remarkably different. He said some things that were actually kind of funny. Like he was talking about the chart up on that he turned his head and looked at. He said, last time I put that chart up, I never really got to look at it. I mean, it was different. It was just a different tone for him. Now, let me get to the part that we're all interested in. That is the foreign policy part. He said, I was the first president in modern times to start no wars. Okay, that's fair. He didn't start wars. He did continue what was going on with Afghanistan and fight with ISIS and things along those lines. Okay. He praised Orban for being tough, and there's only one way to solve it, bring President Trump back. That's what Orban had said of Trump. So that's why he likes Orban, because Orban says nice things about him. Talked about Bush did nothing about Georgia. Obama did nothing about Ukraine. The current administration, Russia took all of Ukraine. Like, he didn't mention that Russia was the bad guy here with that. He just went and said what these previous presidents did or didn't do. And now, to some degree, I understand that, because every president has to draw a contrast, or every candidate has to draw a contrast between himself and the person before him. He's not running against Putin, but it was just weirdly phrased. And then Trump, during the Trump administration, Russia took nothing, he said. I thought that's interesting, and that is what the message he's trying to drive. And there are Republicans that say, see, during the Trump administration, Putin wouldn't have dared to do that. I know on the left, what those on the left say, well, he's in Putin's pocket. I'm telling you, Republicans don't think like that, generally speaking. They think that he's just such a tough guy, they wouldn't have done anything about it, or they wouldn't have dared to try it. Okay. Our opponents inherited peace, which isn't really true. There was still Afghanistan, and yeah, ISIS was wrapping up. Syria was still going on, but it is, the next part is kind of true. Our opponents inherited peace and turned it into war. Well, we're in a lot more wars right now than we were then, so that's fair enough, but it wasn't like it was an absence of war before. We left behind $85 billion of equipment in Afghanistan. Now, I could be wrong about, I'm not going to say what the number is. I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's half that. That's tragically bad, right? And all that could have been, not all of that, but much of that could have been used in Ukraine right now. I mean, had we been thinking, instead it's on being sold by the Taliban. Emboldened by it, Russia invaded Ukraine. And again, that's a narrative that Republicans will hear For 18 months, not one attack on an American soldier. We gave up Bagram, which is 1 hour from where China makes nukes, and now China owns it. Yeah. We want our hostages back. They better be back before I assume office, or you'll pay a big price. Again, that's the way that he thinks. He acts this tough guy kind of image. They would never have started a war under my administration, and so that's the real meat and potatoes of what Trump said about foreign policy during the speech. He went on to list a bunch of other grievances that normally that we would list, talking about the other side. He talked about all the positive things that were done in his administration from his perspective. Okay, John Roscoe just put out here, "Wake up, Darren." Okay, I'm trying to explain what happened from that perspective. I'm not arguing for Trump. If you think that I'm arguing that perspective, you're the one who does not understand what is going on with what I'm doing in this video. I'm trying to explain that, and then I'm going to try to explain as clearly as I can how Republicans see things. So it's not like I've drunk Kool-Aid and I'm going, yeah, this is wonderful. I'm saying this is what he's thinking. Okay, John? All right. And then he wrapped up with a message of trying to be unified at the very end. Okay. So with that all being said, tell me, what questions did you have for me about what I saw? Because I watched about as much of the convention as I could. I was doing stuff with my family during the day, which is why you saw me not in my office, but out at a lake or out on a trail or doing stuff like that. So I didn't watch the daytime stuff, but I watched all the primetime things. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the very last message, unless there's some reason otherwise not to. Professor, I don't know what that is. Some kind of foreign language I can't detect. And then it disappeared. Okay. Professor, I know you were a big Nikki Haley fan. How do I feel about her today? Okay. Man, I wish someone like Nikki, or even someone on the other side that was a somewhat moderate, was running. I think a moderate candidate could swoop in and really grab. This is one of the first elections in my lifetime that I think a moderate could actually pull something off. Ross Perot was different, but he took a lot from Bush, which gave us Clinton. And a real moderate could go right down the middle and attract a lot. I'm not saying that she's moderate. She's a hawkish Republican. I'm sad to see that she did this, but she was setting herself up for 2028. That's why she, unified with the party. That's what was going on with that. I still think that her positions are right, and I wish she had amplified more of her positions at this, but she was trying to be unifying rather than trying to create a contrast between her and Trump at this point. Okay. Good morning, Cheryl. How are you? My biggest reason to vote for Trump is because I have property in the Rio Grande. Okay. Okay. Professor, are you worried about the future of the party? Yes, there's going to be a real fight for the soul of the party on the other side of whatever happens here. I mean, whether Trump wins, if Trump wins, it'll be delayed by 4. Okay, it'll be delayed by 4 years if Trump wins, and if Trump loses, then we'll have the fight for the soul of the party sooner. That's what I'm trying to explain. Okay, John Davenport, Nikki's a religious zealot. Do you have a question here? Ask me questions about what actually happened with the party rather than that, and I'm happy to try to answer. I talked about nothing about Ukraine. Yeah, that's right. He didn't talk directly about Ukraine. He talked around it, and as people have pointed out, I was really worried about J.D. Vance's speech because it was billed as supposed to be foreign policy, and it turned out not to be really foreign policy, and he very briefly touched on some things. they were trying to humanize Vance and help us understand who he was, where he came from, that background. And so I get that. But yeah, and just because he didn't say anything didn't mean that he couldn't actually mean something else. So that's pretty fair. Okay, like 5 or 6 things just came up in about 2 seconds, and I can't answer all of those. So cut and paste your own question and put it back in if I don't answer it. Okay. So Mick B seems like much more unity, less about division. Yes, there is a real push toward unity, but you're also losing Republican conservative kind of principles in the quest for more unity. But that's because they want to win more than they want to hang on to specific principles, and I think that's a fair interpretation. What will be the difference between Trump's rhetoric and actions when it comes to Ukraine? In the past, there was a lot of difference. I think. See, this is the one silver lining that gives me some hope. And now I know somebody was like, "Wake up, Professor." Okay, I'm just telling you where I personally am. If Trump wins, I think that the reality might be different than the rhetoric, because that's just how Trump is. So that doesn't mean that it'll go well for Ukraine, and I don't think that Trump is actually better for Ukraine as far as I can tell from what has been said so far. But he's got this weird wild card kind of way of doing things that he could surprise us. Okay, Cheryl said Mark Kelly polled best among Biden's alternatives, 5 points above Biden. He has been to both Russia and Ukraine and understands religion deeply. I think someone like a Mark Kelly could actually be palatable enough to the right, welcoming to the center, and on the left, he's not everything that they would want, but he's better than Trump. So someone like that could run through the lane. I think if they put up a hard progressive liberal, very strong on the left kind on the other side, it'll be a harder fight. If they put up Kamala, it'll be a harder fight. If they keep Joe, it's a harder fight. So, yeah, we'll see how that all works. Trump had a phone call with Zelensky. That's positive. There's more positive to that. So Trump also put out a post afterwards, and it wasn't that. It was less than what I was hoping that what he would say. What Zelensky said was kind and gracious. What Trump said was, it wasn't curt. It was just, it didn't go far as I would hope it would have. Zelensky did invite Trump to see Ukraine for himself. I hope he does. I hope he goes. I don't know that he will, or wouldn't expect that he would, but it'd be hard to go there, see what's happened, and then not have a different stance, I would imagine. Okay. John Roscoe keeps peppering me with unkind comments. So I'm going to put you in timeout until you can stop being somewhat petty about this. I'm saying if you want to ask questions, you're welcome to ask questions. So, and I don't do this very often, but you got to stop peppering me with like, "Wake up, Professor, you got to understand what." Okay, I get it. I'm telling you perspective here. I'm not saying that this perspective is right. I'm saying this is what the perspective is from those on the right-hand side of the spectrum. Okay. General. Okay, so somebody said, "General, please stop spamming." It's okay to keep saying things in here. It's not okay to be abusive, but it's okay to cut and paste and cut and paste and cut and paste. I've asked for that because I'm going to ask the end of the line, the last question. Like Allison saying, "Laugh out loud, always a teacher," and then I'm going to go back up to the next one. Okay, do you honestly believe that Mr. Trump has intellectual capacity and depth of knowledge in foreign policy issues to be president? Well, he already was president, and he had his advisors around him doing much of the heavy work. He is not an Obama-like intellect. Nobody's arguing that. So yeah, that's why you have all the other posts built in around you. And what Trump will do is what is best for Trump. And that's, again, that's the other side of that. He's a wild card, so he'll follow Trump's interests rather than any particular ideology. And that's also dangerous as well. Will Trump abandon Europe to Putin's interest and disposal? I don't know. I don't know that you can say that. Like, I know that people will say, well, Trump, he's just going to roll over for Putin, or he's just, Putin's stooge. I don't know. I mean, from things that have been said, it looks like that's the direction that it could be, but I don't know that he's in Putin's pocket necessarily. I think he will do whatever is best for Trump, and that could be doing Putin's interest, and that could be that he's going to stand up and go, you know what, Ukraine is going to win, and we're going to provide them with everything to beat the crap out of you, and what? I just don't know. Whatever makes him look best is what he will do. I mean, that's what politicians generally do, but like he's like so what a politician is to a normal human being, Trump is to a politician. Like, it's like politician like on steroids, because it's all about him and his ego. Okay, where do I see the Republican Party in 4 years? Best case and worst case scenario. I think we have a fight for the soul of the party, and we deal with who are we? Are we populist or are we conservatives? And what does that mean? Because the populists are really chasing down beating down the trail of protectionism and anti-immigration and no Ukraine and these kind of things that are not standard conservative kind of principles. And so we're going to have a fight, an intramural fight within the party for who we actually are. And that wouldn't really concern the left. That is just like a family meeting that we have to have and get together and deal with. Okay. Professor, you're an expert on the Constitution and its resilience. I've heard that Project 2025 has elements that will fundamentally ladder the balance. Do you think this is true? So I think Project 2025 is a new iteration of something that's always been there, where parties try to put in as many of their people, like the Leadership Institute in DC has been there for 40 years, working on trying to put good conservatives into places in government, train them to do things. The left does the same thing. Project 2025, I think, again, this is my perspective, is more of a boogeyman than it is a real threat. It's been ginned up. Everybody points to it. I've read some about it. So the biggest element that could change is if civil service becomes political appointments. That's the part that could become tricky. But then it becomes that for each term. It's not like it's game over. Then that would mean that conservatives have a stronger hand during their administration, and then Republicans have a stronger hand, and then the Democrats have a stronger hand during their administration, and it just means more higher turnover. I mean, that's what that'll amount to, in my estimation. But it seems like it's overblown to my mind, but I could be wrong. I mean, maybe somebody understands things that I don't know about it, and that's perfectly fine. El Kudo says, Professor, a war game scenario may be a topic for an article or video. If you were a president, how would you go about hijacking the system to stay in power permanently? That's going to be freaking difficult. Like some people, so one of the things that really bothered me was seeing this poll that I put out on my YouTube, because you're all like really wound up about that he could like, okay, so here, I put this out a day ago. What do you truly believe about Donald Trump? If elected, he'll overthrow democracy. No more elections, 46%. He's not a great guy who's combative and pushes an unsavory agenda, 31%. He's a mixed bag, some bad, some good, some bad, but we'll be okay, 10%. He's very much what America needs, 6%, and 7% just wanted to see the results. And I put that out. And again, the 46% think that there will be no more elections after this. Our institutions in the United States are incredibly strong. The Founding Fathers put these up together in a way that it's hard because we put this person in charge and then we put this person to watch that person and this person to watch that person and these people to watch those persons. And like, okay, and that's just at the federal level. Then you have states. So you have federal divided into three houses, and one of those, or three groups of within government, and then one of those is half divided. And like it's hard to be able to. So I remember I can't remember which founding father it was, but in my dissertation research, one of the founding fathers was talking about how the government is designed so that no one person could take it down. Now that doesn't mean a cabal couldn't do it. Like there couldn't be so much on one side, and this is why divided government's actually a good thing rather than a bad thing. Like if you just want all of your side to win, be careful. There's no counterbalance. The counterbalance is actually healthy. So I don't see a scenario where this is the last election that we'll ever have in our lifetime. That's way overblown. Okay. I would like those people to put up real money and 4 years from now have to pay whichever side of, whatever horrible organization they hate, that real money, in order to pay the price for the misinformation that they're spreading. It's not disinformation, it's misinformation. I just don't see it. I honestly, I just don't see it. Okay. So let's see. Paul Gallagher says, do you see Trump allowing Poland to be invaded? No, I don't see that kind of thing allowing that. Poland being invaded becomes, again, I think Russia's a real threat, but he's a real threat. How was it put? There was this really interesting thing that said, because Putin saw the weakness in NATO, that's why he invaded. It wasn't because Ukraine wasn't part of NATO. Or it was something very close to that. There's something right about that way of thinking about it. Like he saw an opportunity. Like, yes, it's because they're not in NATO, but it's because he saw the weakness in NATO. And NATO has unified and become far stronger and far more of a shield than it was before. So I'm less worried about NATO being invaded right now for all the rhetoric. So there's a difference between rhetoric and what actually happens sometimes. And I see a difference between the rhetoric about we're going to, nuke NATO or whatever. And what will probably happen is I'd be really worried if I was in Georgia or if I was in Moldova, because that's still in play out of NATO, and a bully doesn't tend to hit the football linebacker. He tends to go after the scrawny kid that is into video games, right? I mean, that's what Putin, I think, will do. And maybe even some of the former Stans that were part of the Soviet Union would be absorbed or something along those lines. But I don't think I'd be surprised if he would go after Poland immediately. Like that would be something that he would do without having gobbled up some other things to gather some strength first. I don't know. I could be wrong. This is just my perspective. Are guardrails barely held on January 6, 2020? What are you even talking about? January 6 was a terrible black mark on our nation's history. Do you think that was an overthrow? Like, what could they have done that could have actually overthrown? Like, I mean, I guess you could have tried to hold Pence hostage or something so he can't certify it. But that was a terrible riot that should never have happened. It was ugly. It was despicable. But as far as like overthrowing the whole government, that's not. I don't know what people thought that they were going to do. I think they thought they were going to shout him down and shame him into doing it. But as far as like actually taking over the thing, again, this is overblown. I'm not minimizing that it was a despicable, ugly, nasty, terrible, worst day in many, many years. But what Okay. Our institutions are only as strong, this is Cheryl, as the people within them doing the right thing rather than the expedient thing. Trump is trying to surround himself by loyalists rather than institutionalists. And Cheryl's very right. And this is part of the intramural fight within the party, is that loyalty to Trump as opposed to loyalty to the institution that's a problem. Dan, Trump's speech was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's speech to a degree, but it was all going to be Mr. Hyde probably before it got tempered and became a Dr. Jekyll speech. He needed domestic compliance. Georgia is undefended, so that's I'm not sure what we're talking about here. Can you guarantee that? Are you concerned about the Trump and Epstein connections? I have no idea about Trump and Epstein connections. Like that's not something. Okay, so the question should be about the convention and Trump and future and those kind of things. I'm not equipped to talk about Trump and Epstein because I don't know anything about it. Is he possibly connected there? Sure. I mean, who knows? I don't. Okay. It's about Putin, as is Georgia, the country. I'm not sure what we're saying here. El Kudos. Okay. Trump demands absolute loyalty, but is the most unloyal person you'll ever meet. Well, that is how many. Okay, so I'm not a psychologist, right? But I mean, he's certainly got some dark tetrad traits, the narcissism and other factors like that. I look at it as pseudo transformational leadership. That's within, I study leadership, right? And transformational leadership is different than pseudo-transformational leadership, where instead of transforming the individual toward the mission of the organization or what we aspire to, it's toward the individual leader. And I certainly see that as well. He is unloyal to anyone who's not loyal to him. And loyalty is a high value to him, and it's probably a higher value to him than the competence or loyalty to the mission, and that's problematic. Okay, let's see, where are we? So you think, well, why would you even say that? So you think after Jan 6 we should call the rioter heroes? No, I don't think that at all. I don't know why you'd even take the time to type that out. I've never said anything like that, nor do I think that. George W. Bush starting a war in Afghanistan has nothing to do with what we're talking about with the... Okay, so this isn't grievance time about things Republican. This is to talk about the Trump speech and the convention and what we'll see going forward. So please just set aside all the other questions that are about whatever else, and let's talk about this, because I'm trying to help you understand what's going on here. It was Green Bay Sweep. Paul Gallagher, YouTube deletes comments if they mention too many details, so it's hard to make sensible question statements. Sorry if I didn't know that. Sorry about that. Yeah, dark triad is narcissism, psychopathology, and Machiavellianism. We talk about these in my power and influence class, and then dark tetrad adds one to that as well. But yeah, you see a lot of those kind of traits. Yeah. Do you think Trump-Vance position? Thank you. Talking about Trump-Vance position on whatever. I don't even know what's coming here yet because I haven't read the rest of it, but that's what we should be focused on. Do you think that the Trump-Vance position on Ukraine will end up being whatever Peter Thiel feels about Ukraine? So, I don't know enough about this, but I understand that Peter Thiel is behind the scenes kind of pushing the Trump the direction that he's going. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and some other like big money names like that. Vivek is in that kind of camp, and Vance actually worked somehow with Vivek back with like Rumble or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, and so I think these guys have a very different view of Russia-Ukraine, and that could be shaping it. But that shaping. Okay, that shaping the politicians doesn't necessarily shape the populace, but the politicians are also shaping the populace, like when Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker, who's not a politician but is also shaping. And it's really weird to see Republicans who are supposed to be, very strong on foreign policy, peace through strength, doing what they're doing. It's really bizarre. Um, okay, Francis says, "Hey, Professor Gerdes, do you think you know more about this subject than Professor Mearsheimer or Sachs?" Uh, no, I think they know more than I do, but I think they're also somewhat beholden to their positions and the papers that they've written about. Because if they're wrong, it upends everything that they have written and put their name on for the last 20 or 30 years in foreign policy and their view of how the world works. Um, I think, if you're going to ask that, Francis, then you'd ask about, or if I know more than Tim Snyder, right? I mean, so I think Mearsheimer and Sachs are wrong and Snyder and others are right. So um, it's not, and again, you've got to be humble and recognize you don't know everything, but uh, Mearsheimer and Sachs are clearly beholden to a particular view, and that's okay. But which view is right? That's what you have to ask yourself. Um, okay, so billionaires buying the White House. Well, not exactly. Billionaires are influencing, but so are other people, and billionaires influence on the other side. But here, I think their influence is not supportive of Ukraine necessarily as it is of. It's more influencing, supportive of Russia, but I don't think that's the reason that they're there. They just have that. I think they have. Um, there's part of a broader narrative that it's feeding into that is not. It's not directly about that, um, and they could probably even perhaps let that go and still be okay because they're looking at other factors. It's hard to explain, but I don't think it's not like they're Russian agents trying to do something nefarious. I think it's just part of a bigger. It's just one piece of a bigger puzzle for them. Alan says, arriving late to this presentation, but Trump made quite a quiet reference to the last election being stolen from him. Yeah, that was actually, I saw that as well. And this will not happen again. Would that give you cause for concern? He made a very subtle reference to it, but he has toned that down significantly. He still has a bee under his bonnet. Remember, he's an egoist, and he still feels stung from being rejected from before. That doesn't mean that he is right at all, but he is. Yeah. So does it give me concern? Of course, it gives me concern, but it's surprising that he didn't say more toward that end, Alan. If that makes any sense. Cheryl says Elon Musk has business interests in Russia and China. He certainly does, and maybe that's part of what's feeding the way that he sees things. But I think there's something even bigger. This is okay. I almost hesitate to bring that up. I mentioned it the other day, but so Mark Cuban was having Cuban is also a billionaire, in the same kind of circles, and he was saying, well, what he thinks is going on is they're backing him because they want Bitcoin to become an alternative currency, and they want to use Trump to get to Bitcoin. So it's a Bitcoin play, which is why those billionaires are involved. It has nothing to do really directly with Ukraine. Like, that's not their great interest. Ukraine is just one of a number of issues, right? On this channel, we talk about it exclusively. This channel is given over to that, and I only talk about political stuff like Trump's election because of this. I don't talk about this tax policy or school choice or you name the issue, right? It's not for that. And for many people, Ukraine is here, and for other people, it's here, and for other people, it's way up here. So with those tech billionaires, I don't think it's high on their. It's just part of the grouping of things that they're talking about. It's not the thing. Like, for us, we're very interested in the subject and how we can help. Okay. Collective West. Do I think that Vance will be a more influential in a Trump administration than is the typical case for the VPs? Trump may see Vance as his Medvedev for the 2028 election. Okay, so you're actually onto something here. No, I don't think he'll be more influential, but the VP is usually the attack dog. I don't think Trump will take that because Trump is so used to being an attack dog, but he'll have another attack dog. The reason for Vance, I think, is because, okay, the way many of you will say, well, you have to vote for Biden. If you don't vote for Biden, you hate Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you don't understand. It doesn't matter how I vote in my state because unless 300,000 other votes are shifted in my particular state, it doesn't matter. In the United States, each state casts their vote as a state for the majority that wins. And there's only really about 6 states in play after, California is neutralized by Texas and, Florida neutralizes New York and blah, 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 all the way around. Right now, there's 6 states that are still swing states that are in play. And 3 of those 6 swing states are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And if you don't know where they are, they're flanked by Ohio. Ohio is to the left of Pennsylvania, to the right of Michigan, and Wisconsin's on the other side of Michigan. Okay, so Vance speaks Midwest, and he speaks the grievances of, he can articulate the grievances of the, workers that feel like they're left behind, and I think that's why he was picked for that, because they want to win the election. And then, he kind of is on the same page with Trump now, even though he wasn't once upon a time. So I mean, that's really the reality there. Okay. Elmar Helb. It doesn't matter how you vote. Doesn't that mean that there's something very broken with the electoral? Well, so you got to understand how the electoral system in the United States is actually created. It's a system. The United States actually means nations, right? Like a nation state. And the 13 original nations that got together, they're throwing their vote as a state toward this super state that is the United States. And so no, it's just, this is how the rules of the game are created. You can create the rules any way you want, and then as long as you're playing toward the game, like, it doesn't matter how far somebody runs down the field. What matters is how many touchdowns did you have, or that sort of thing. So this is where that is. You really have more action in the primary than you do in the general election. And I got to vote for Haley, and I was happy about that, although the rest of my state went more for Trump, and that's unfortunate, but that's where we are. Okay. Let's see. Collective West. Yes, the vice presidential candidate is usually chosen with a view toward the Electoral College math, but LBG said the VP role itself was not worth the bucket of worm. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the VP doesn't really do a lot. So when you're looking at, for example, Kamala, and well, she can be the next whatever. I mean, what has she actually done over the last few years? And that's not a swipe at her. What did Pence do? Well, what did the previous VP before that? Well, I mean, that was Biden, right? What did he do as VP? You don't really do a lot as VP. I mean, you're kind of like in the British system, the spare to the king, right? The heir and the spare, right? The prince, the second prince. That's how it works. The general public is manipulable and fickle. Electoral College is only slightly smarter, but that helps. Now Haley supports Trump on your board now, right? I don't understand what the question is. Now that Haley supports Trump, you're on board. No, I'm not. I'm not voting for Trump. I'm also not voting for Biden. I mean, and I've said that many times. So people just assume things of me. That's unfortunate. Okay. I'm not sure that I understand that. What are you ranting about, and who, according to you, are they? So important, I am not watching them or hearing from. I don't even know what you're saying there. Okay. Void philosopher. I think Trump can switch to supporting Ukraine overnight. I think this is just his debating and governing style, so no one knows what he's about to do. Okay. In my gut, I believe that void philosopher is right, but it's not a risk that I want to take. So what I know is I know that Biden will slow walk stuff to Ukraine and support it in statements and things along those lines. What I don't know is what Trump will do, even though I know his statements. But Trump could turn on a dime if he thinks that's going to help him. But I don't know that he will. And so it leaves you in a very precarious place. But that is how Trump is, because he doesn't have a consistent, principled center. So that could be, but we can't prove it. We will never know until we know, if that makes sense. Okay. Republicans are split right now. You have a traditional Republicans and you have Trump Republicans. Absolutely. I'm in the traditional camp. I'm not in the Trump Republican camp. And it's a very frustrating thing to watch. And they're talking about the party's more united than ever. No, there's still a bunch of us sitting back going, what are you doing, guys? I feel like you're just making excuses for VP Peak. VP Peak? Vance is obviously awful. Yeah, okay. I'm not arguing. Did you hear me say anything that's pro Vance? I didn't say anything that was, supporting him. And by the way, I'm not trying to communicate what I say. If I'm saying something, this is how I see it, I qualify it. I'm trying to explain how Republicans are seeing this, and to help bring some clarity. Okay, after Trump, do you think there will be changes to the U.S. Constitution to bring up to date modern issues that Trump has taken advantage of, like immunity or invoking insurrection by tightening areas? Okay, so changing the Constitution takes a very long, hard, laborious process. So no, it's not something that's a very easy thing. You have to pass it through states and then have a supermajority in the House and Senate. It's a long thing. As far as the immunity, so the immunity was not like, if I understand the immunity bit correctly, there is, okay. I'm not sure that I do fully have it, but what I gather of it is what the founding fathers were actually saying. The proper place to deal with a politician who is faithfully executing their duties is not because you don't like what they did, or you think they did it wrong, or you think they're bad or something like that, but in an impeachment to throw them out. So, and they talked about this at some length in the Constitutional Convention of how to go about doing that. So what the Supreme Court said with a narrow interpretation is correct. If you go too far, then you give him reign to do anything, and you can't go that far. But I don't think that they were going that far. But I think the news reports allowed it to seem like it's bigger than it is. That's my understanding of it. But again, I could be wrong, and somebody could know something that I don't know. Do I believe that Democrats will pick a full lefty candidate applying the Nash equilibrium? I don't know what the Democrats will do. I'm curious what you think the Democrats will do. The last thing that I read was that Biden is planning to hit the campaign trail again next week. But I also read before that he was going to, bow out by this weekend. I don't know what he's going to do. I know he feels, from what I've read, he feels betrayed by his own party. And from the right looking at this, I'm going, guys, what are you doing? Well, like, we could see that he was in decline for however long. Like, you could see that he was slowing down. He wasn't the Joe Biden of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. And like, you don't think we can see this. So it's frustrating to watch that this is where we are in our choices. But it's not my party. So it's like, you guys got to get that sorted out on the left. That's not for me to determine. I have my own issues to wrestle with. So I'm not going to condemn whatever you do. You all have to sort it out. I do think that Biden has less of a chance, or the Democrats have less of a chance if they hang on to Biden. That's my perspective. But again, my perspective is filtered through a certain worldview that I don't know that I always see clearly. And so if you're on the left and so actually the person in the middle that's truly neither right nor left is actually going to see this most clearly. on the left, you're going to have one set of biases. On the right, I'm going to have a certain other set of biases. But at least I'm aware of my biases, and that's an important thing to wrestle with. Okay, when we wanted to impeach Trump, argument was that we can't impeach him because he's no longer president. We need to make a criminal case. Now we can't have criminal case. Okay, I'm not sure what you're asking there. I don't know. I hope they pick Senator Mark Kelly. So somebody like Kelly. Well, no, it won't. I don't think it'll be Harris. I think they'll. Well, I don't know. They could start over. But if they started with a Mark Kelly or someone like that, if they find someone that is on the left but not too far to the left, I think that. I think they could get some traction, but again, I can't tell you how to run your convention. I'm a Republican. Why would you want to listen to me? Ben asks, is Trump a good Christian? Not from what I can detect. I think he says a lot of things in order to appeal to Christians, but I don't see him living that. I don't see any evidence of that. He doesn't seem to. No, I wouldn't suggest that he is. If you're asking me personally, I know of nothing that says that he is. Like he'll say he's Presbyterian, but I mean, as far as a conversion experience where he has given his life over to Christ, I don't see anything like that. It is just weird. Trump made a statement against Hamas, therefore against Iran, and therefore against Russia in some sense. So anything can happen, really. Yeah, I mean, this is really quite a mixed bag. Okay, Trump is the most unchristian person you can think of. Are you asking me, or are you just trying to make a statement, or what's the... Okay. What other questions do you have about the convention, about what it means for Ukraine, what it means going forward for the party, those kind of things? I'm happy to answer that. Thank you, Cheryl. We need to listen to people like you, Dr. Gerdes. Yes, but you also need to listen to somebody on the other side and then triangulate on the facts and see what, maybe Gerdes is nuts. Maybe this other guy on the other side is nuts, but maybe there's something that Gerdes said that's right and that this other guy said that's right, and that you can and so you can make your own decisions and understand what you're seeing, because I don't claim to have Actually, I do claim to have my own perspective and biases, and I recognize that. I find this really interesting when I put out a lot of polls on my community tab, and what you say in the polls really is interesting to me, because I don't necessarily see it the way that you see it. So, for example, when Trump was convicted as a felon, right? There were on Fox News. If you watch Fox News, you'd get a very different perspective than CNN. And I try to triangulate between the different CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and rotate back between them when I'm watching an important event like the shooting of the assassination attempt. So when he was convicted as a felon on Fox News, they were like, well, they just made Trump. He's now going to be the president because of this. And that is how people on the right actually felt and saw this. Because they see it as political persecution, lawfare being used to take down their opponent. That's how Republicans actually feel about what happened with Trump's conviction, the felony, or felonies, plural. But that's not how it was taken, certainly on the left. And in the middle, the polling 3 weeks later showed that it broke about 3-1 against Trump, not for Trump. And so you have to be aware of those kinds of biases. Personally, I feel that the odds of a Trump presidency are many times higher, and very, very likely compared to what it was just a month ago. That's how I personally feel after both the debate, which woke a lot of the country up, and then all the push to remove Biden, and then the assassination attempt that failed. And it's just, I think Trump is very likely from what I can detect. Now, if that's the case, then the next step, and I've behind the scenes already been trying to figure this out and reach out to people, is like, how do we get people around Trump that can influence him with Ukraine, or get influence the population to recognize that Ukraine is important, or those kind of things. Like that's where I am. That's a space that I'm in mentally, is how do we influence that. And if Trump is not elected, then okay, then my effort will have been in vain. But if he is, then that's where we need to be headed. You're skating to where the puck is going, not where the puck is. Okay, so if that helps at all. A lot of people who claim Christianity are not actually Christians, but theists. They believe in God, maybe as a divine creator, but don't pursue any relationship with Christ and their Savior. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I get that. And maybe he is some sort of theist, but I think he also worships himself rather than God. I mean, it's about Trump. Professor Gerdes, what are your thoughts about the hegemony stability theory related to the axis of solidifying with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and how the current presidential cycle impacts that? Okay, so let me pursue that a little bit differently. There is I don't want to say axis of evil. That was kind of overplayed in the Bush administration with that line, but there is a group of anti-Western, anti-U.S. particularly, but anti-Western nations like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, that are coalescing in order to, not because they like each other and can get along really, but because they hate the West and they want to push against the West. And that's a real thing. North Korea, I was just reading something about, not North Korea, Iran's only weeks away potentially from having nuclear capability. That would be terrible. Absolutely terrible. Like, the only reason that Russia is getting away with what it's doing is because it has nukes, because it's conventionally not fighting that well, and a nuclear Iran is just not good. Anyway, I don't know if I answered the question or not, but I'm trying to go on to others. I think the best way to get Trump on board with Ukraine is to make it seem profitable. You might be right, and I've read others that have said the same kind of thing. Perhaps Europeans can buy American surplus, a sort of renewed Lend-Lease. I think that is perhaps the B plan, the fallback plan for Europe. Is Europe, you're on notice, you got to strengthen here, and then if the U.S. is like, look, we're not going to do any more of that, then can we buy your weapons? I don't think Trump is going to say you can't buy American weapons, and he'll be happy to wheel and deal like that, because I don't think that he's just in Putin's pocket. I think look, what I said about my bias is on the right, I think your bias is on the left. You need to consider that maybe Trump's not just in Putin's pocket and they have dirt on him or whatever. Maybe it's just that Trump thinks about Trump, and that could very well be. There's a super chat in here, and I want to honor the super chat. Props on the Vlad Vexler 1 hour conversation. I myself am a big fan. I've rarely seen him that good and coherent while being that exploratory. Yeah, no, that was a great conversation. And if you met, like, it's funny, when I do these, so I've done this with Jake, with Arthur Rahe, with not reporting from Ukraine, with Ukraine Matters, with all kinds of other YouTubers, and they just don't get nearly the play that they should. And it's tragic, because Vlad, I'm still thinking about points that Vlad made, like I was talking about MAGA being the iteration of essentially to the right what the woke progressive kind of thing is on the far left, and he was saying that's not a manifestation of the far left, it's a manifestation of the middle in reverse, and he was trying to explain why I'm still chewing on his thoughts about that. And it's weird to my mind, because in the United States, the further you are to the left, the more that you tend to pick up that kind of progressive strain. But he's arguing it differently because he's being precise about what it is in political science. So yeah, that was a great conversation. I walked away thinking, man, I wish I was just doing nothing but having those kind of conversations, because that was awesome. If you haven't seen that, go back about 5 days ago, and so that would be like 10, 12 videos back. It's in red with Vlad and me on the cover. It's a great conversation. Okay, Professor, when you say this is how Republicans see this, it sounds as if all of them were MAGA. No, I'm not saying that they're all MAGA and they would be manipulative. And can you comment on that? No, I'm saying generally speaking, Republicans tend to see this. And generally speaking, that's different than liberals see it that way. And it's just different. Like Democrats tend to see things differently. Republicans tend to see things differently. But I'm not saying that they're all MAGA or they're all going to follow that. And there's a split within the Republican Party about these kind of things. 100% Dr. Gerdes nailed it. Trump will do whatever he perceives will benefit him at any given moment. I think that's fair. Like, so if you want to try to predict where people are going, it's usually good to predict where their self-interest lies and try to figure that out. And if you can, see where their self-interest is, you're onto something. You're moving the right direction. That was a good point about Vlad as he sees libertarians as centrists. This would explain nicely why they often pick aspects of both left and right. Yeah, and so maybe because his academic training is in political science, and so he's using certain precise kind of words, or the way that he's saying things is a little different than a more popularized way that I describe things, more common way that I describe things. But yeah, he's brilliant, and that's good stuff. The reason that I even contacted Vlad to begin with was because he's one of the voices that is out there calling for civility. I do this as well, but there's not a lot of us that are like out there. Hey, look, and this was before Trump was shot that we're doing this. Like, tone it down. Let's think about how we're supposed to be interacting with each other. And he's been doing this consistently for a long time, and I appreciate him for that. Okay, as an independent, I just vote for the person that seems to have a better ideas and express how to implement them. Roy Collins said that. Roy and the independents like him are the ones that will determine the future of the nation. Now, the reason that that's the case is because you have about a third on the right and a third on the left, and it varies a little bit here and there, but and that third in the middle is what's going to decide. And that third in the middle in about 6 states is what's going to decide. Okay, so Vlad is great. Yes. Pictures. Yes. Trump is transactional. And that's right. The word transactional is actually very important here. Trump is transactional. That's the kind of leader he is. I'll give you this, you give me that. That's the way he operates. And I would say that that's a very common way that he operates as well. Okay. Yeah, in Europe is far shifted to the left from where we actually are. So I understand that, Cheryl. Okay. In Germany, we have a liberal party, the FDP, and they are centrist. Personal freedom above all, as both extreme left and right lead to an oppressive state. Okay, leaders with ideologies confuse him. Have you ever met a New York businessman? Trump is no longer a mystery. I don't know what you're asking there. Okay, another super chat just popped out. It is great to think outside the square. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and you should be. Like, after you listen to me, if you're not listening to somebody that has a contrary view, like you can listen to somebody that also supports Ukraine that still thinks very different than me. There are others that are popping to my mind right now that say stuff different than I do, especially about American politics, and that's okay. You can hear things from the other perspective, and that it doesn't hurt me. And the last thing I want to do is say that person's wrong, because I don't know that I have the corner on truth. Now, I wish everybody would take that kind of position. Here's how I see it, and look at the other side and see what it is. But most people just don't think in those terms necessarily. And much of the time, I'm not even talking about my position. When I talk about my position, I qualify. The rest of the time, I'm trying to say, hey, Republicans see it like this, generally speaking, or something along those lines. Or I'm relying in my normal videos, my daily brief or the 3 big stories, I'm relying very heavily on citing what I'm saying. Here's the news. That's why I show you most of the time my newspaper articles, unless I'm like out with the kids on a trail or something and I have to do it differently. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I try to cite my sources. Okay, Roy Collins says, in a multi-party system that works even better. I can see things the same way, although I do not favor a certain direction. And yeah, but we're not in a multi-party system. we're in fractured parties. So in our two-party system, we have a two-party system because it's easiest to get election when you can be as big as possible. But then you have different coalitions within each party that don't necessarily see things the same way as each other, and that's where we are with a real fight for the soul of the Republican Party right now, on the Republican side. Professor, do you think this convention increased the popularity of MAGA among Republicans or not? Are Reagan Republicans pushed out of the party? I don't think they were appealing to Reagan Republicans. I think they know where we are, and they're actually trying to go around us. This is me talking. This is my perspective. They would like us to be there. They want to show how big and tough they are, but I think that they are actually thinking, how do we expand larger? And they actually are making inroads into minority populations that they normally don't get. And they're like black males are significantly larger polling for Trump right now than they have in the past voted for Republicans. They're trying to reach out to, again, it's the weirdest thing watching this convention. It was like watching a Democrat convention of 60 years back, because the Republicans are making the case to the forgotten working man, and that used to be the bread and butter of the left. And so it's just a bizarre thing to watch. And it's not bad. You can reach out to whoever you want to reach out to, but you have to maintain your principles as you reach out, not if they're losing their principles, and that's going to change the essence of the party in pursuit of trying to make the party bigger. Okay. Again, the Buckeye state strikes again. We have a uniparty and MAGA for two parties. It's no longer Democrats and Republicans. A uniparty and MAGA. Well, I tell you what, I am about as conservative as they make them, and I'm MAGA. I'm all behind making Ukraine great again. Why? Because traditionally conservative Republicans were socially conservative, economically conservative, and foreign policy conservative. And what I mean by that is that, like, what would Reagan have done with this? Support Ukraine. Russia, that's bad. You can't invade your neighbor like that. This is going to upend world order, and that's going to cause other bad guys to do these things. And so I'm so glad that Marjorie Taylor Greene did what she did with MAGA, because I love my MAGA hat. I think this is exactly where we ought to be as a nation. And I'm trying to remember the name of I think it was a Republican senator who said during the Truman administration, said that foreign policy disputes should end at the shoreline. What he means by that is that we should be speaking with one voice with our foreign policy to other nations. And I think we just did ourselves a tremendous disservice by doing what we have done with the infighting about this, as opposed to actually speaking with one voice. Now, there's a parallel here. I think I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. During COVID, it was a really bizarre thing to watch when Trump was saying, we're going to get this vaccine and we're going to get it faster than we've ever seen it before. And Operation whatever, something Blitz or whatever, in order to get the vaccines out quicker through the FDA. And then Trump loses the election, and Republicans were all on board about how, we're going to, get this vaccine. Yay, go Trump. Trump loses the election. Biden, by the way, did you hear me say Trump loses the election? I'm not like, Trump really won. If he really won, prove it. Like, that's what it amounts to, right? I believe that there was abuse or electoral fraud, but not on a scale that it could have tipped the election. Or if there was, you have to prove that. Like, if that is the case, you have to actually prove it. You can't just assert things and then make it so. That doesn't work. Okay. And so I'll get to your super chats in just a moment, I promise you, but let me finish this. And then Biden wins the election, and then now Democrats are like, I've taken a vaccine, I've taken my third, here's how many shots have you had, right? And Republicans are like, I'm never taking a vaccine ever. Vaccines are bad. How on earth does your political position change the way that the efficacy of the vaccine? It really shouldn't. Like, this is just crazy. Okay. Anyway, all right. So that's where we are with that. I think that the Ukraine conflict the war in Ukraine. I'm not trying to minimize it by saying a conflict. The war in Ukraine might weirdly take that turn if theoretically, if Trump wins and then Democrats kind of go away from it and Republicans become supercharged about it. It might not happen. I'm just speculating that that kind of thing could actually happen, and that would be just weird. Like your political positions shouldn't change whether something is right or wrong. Okay. Thank you, Slava Ukraini, John Scott with the $2 super chat. I appreciate that. The $10 Canadian super chat. Do I think that there is enough checks and balances so that if Trump is elected, there will be future elections? Absolutely, I do. I wrote my dissertation on the Constitution, and it's not about the Constitution as it is now. It's about how the Constitution was created. I read every word of the Constitutional Convention debates. I read every word of the convention debates in every one of the 13, every one of the colonies or countries that had a constitutional convention. So Madison's notes and then all the others. So I have, in fact, I have these on my shelves. Let's see if I can get these over here. All right, these are Eliot's notes. These are Eliot's notes on the Constitutional Convention. And here, just show you, that's what my notes look like as I read through these. I'm telling you, as I read through all of these, like, I took really careful, close notes as I'm going through this. And what I was trying to do, I was looking at what do they understand about leadership as they're going through and talking about how they're framing the system. The system's strong. We have a very strong institutional system in the United States. It's not like many other countries that, like, they can just, flip over the government and do a different thing. And it's a very strong. It endured through the Civil War, right? I'm not worried about that. I think a lot of what is being said right now is overblown partisan stuff that is geared to help from the media, geared to help this is my perspective, geared to help create, how do I say this? Geared to help Biden by increasing the rhetoric that Trump is just this terrible thing and he's not a great guy. Let's be honest, right? But that he's going to overthrow democracy. I just don't see it. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it. Now, that could be my biases from the right, or it could be because I was reading stuff like this and I understand how our system works, but I just don't see it. Okay, that's just me, and other people can have different views and listen to other views and then square that against what I have talked about. Okay, just think about it. If you guys make Donald Trump king, we will have to rethink our ceremonies when he comes over the pond. He's not going to become a king. That's just not the way that works. In the past, unions were a place where politics were discussed, connection between professional but difficult to understand. Keep asking, difficult to understand politics and what effects it will have on your daily life. That's missing now. So, yeah, that triggered a different thought. Politics are much more central. We've lost something in the United States. Vlad and I started talking about this a little bit, and just only a little bit. But the role of politics, or the place of politics, or the place of identity in politics is much more central than it was just a generation ago, because we've cut some of the constraints. We're much more likely to move for our jobs, so family ties are not as strong. Church and social activities and social clubs and those kind of things have been largely reduced for many people, not all. I mean, I still have those kind of church ties and things like that, but I know a lot of people don't. Social media has taken the place of actual relationships, and it's synthetic. It's almost like artificial. It's not the same. And then in social media, you're likely to say things that you would never say to me in person. Like some of the comments that I've seen people make on YouTube. Like if I was sitting in front of you, you wouldn't say that to me. Like right? So some fundamental things have changed in the way that we interact with each other, and so politics is very is become more important than maybe it should be, if that makes sense. Okay. Thanks for answering your question above. I hope you're right. The fact is that he tried to overrun the 2020 election gives me pause. And again, but what does that mean? Like the use of the term insurrection. I mean, was he trying to actually just keep himself in power forever? Like that's what you have to figure out what was going on. And again, on the left, oh, it's an insurrection. They're just trying to take over. On the right, they're like, oh, that was terrible. What are they doing? Or if they're MAGA, they might not even see it necessarily as that bad. I'm not in that kind of camp. I've known people there that were saying some things that I'm like, no, that should be condemned to say that was a good thing. I've known a few people that have said that, and that's not cool. So what was that? So, but the institutions are strong. They're not going to allow for something like that. One of the reasons that this is me talking now. This is my studied opinion. One of the reasons that we were short-sighted with something like Iraq, we thought we were going to go nation build. In the United States, we had 150 years of self-governance before we got to 1776. And so we understood how to do this. In Iraq, this was kind of a newer experience of changing it into a democracy because they had never had a democratic kind of experience before, and not in the way that we're thinking of, at least. And so it was kind of foolhardy to do that. We have very strong, deep ties to this kind of thing, and I think that we have to keep that kind of thing in mind. Okay, Cheryl says Trump's press conference suggesting deeply ignorant things on how to combat a virus did not inspire confidence. His transactional nature was also at play there with regard to masks. That's right, and that's very fair. Can I add to that, Cheryl? Because this isn't to take away from your point, but when the coronavirus first was breaking, I remember I was at an academic conference, and I'm in my hotel room watching. Why are people buying up all these masks? And they're telling, what did the government actually tell us? Don't buy masks. They don't work. And then what do? They reversed themselves 2 months later. Buy masks. If you're not wearing a mask, you could be projecting whatever. So you tend to lose faith in a system that tends to lie to you or not be truthful with you, and that was bad. That was boneheaded. So and that was still all throughout Trump's watch before we switched over to Biden. Okay, Mud Wizard, who do you think the Democrats should choose as a replacement for Joe Biden with the best chance of winning? Seems you don't think it's Kamala Harris in your conversation with ATP Geopolitics. Okay, so I think if Biden stays in place, Trump wins. That is where I am right now. Now, things could change, right? I mean, Trump could do something terrible, or Biden could do something awesome, or I don't know. We're 100 days out from the election, give or take. But as far as I can see, I think Trump is going to win from where we are on July 20th, 2024. That's just my view. I could be wrong. Kamala, I don't know if you like her on the left. I'm assuming that you think she's okay or she's good or whatever. On the right, she's seen as an empty suit. What really matters is if she's seen as that empty suit in the middle. So I'm not going to say that, because I don't see her as particularly stunning, right? It's like how people thought of Dan Quayle back under George Bush Sr. Thought he was kind of dopey. He wasn't dopey, but he was kind of seen that way. But that's my right side bias talking. What matters is what people in the middle think, and I don't know what that is, and so that's all I can tell you. Did you see Pete Buttigieg on Bill Maher last night? He was on point about Vance. I did not see him, and I don't know what he was saying, so I can't speak to that. Cheryl says she's not that popular on the left either. Well, that becomes problematic. From the right, people think that she, like on the right side of the political spectrum, people think that she was selected because of being female and or black or both. And because of that, that doesn't help her with the appearance of competence. So that, I don't know if it's like that in the middle, if people think that it's because of identity politics, because identity politics has been a big thing here in the last 5 years or so, particularly. And so now she could be competent as the day is long, but she doesn't appear that way to those on the right, generally speaking. And that's not going to help her succeed. So I don't think Biden is going to be the guy. Could it be Kamala? She might do better than Biden, but I don't know. I'm thinking somebody who could still emerge might have a better chance than either of them, but I can't tell. I just don't know. I don't know who the person is that would emerge. I'm scared to death. I'm 90, I guess, Social Security. I'm going to be living under a bridge when they take it. I'm not sure that I quite followed, but I don't think you should be scared to death. I think we're overblowing what the dangers could be. I could be wrong. Neil Christensen says, what worries me more about American democracy isn't Trump, but SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, that is, particularly the immunity decision. I wonder what you think about constraints that SCOTUS will actually impose on the executive, Republican or Democratic. Okay, so I talked about this a little earlier, and I think that a narrow read of the SCOTUS decision, as I understand it, is in line with the kind of stuff that we saw in here. Okay, what the founding fathers were talking about, and I'd have to track down where it was in the Constitutional Convention, was that the proper remedy for the president or legislators doing whatever they're doing as they're executing their duty is to throw them out in the next election, or to impeach them if they do something wrong, and not to try them like normal trying of something. That doesn't mean that they're immune from all activity, but if they're doing their duty, you just befuddle the system if you try them because you don't like the way that they did their duty. So a narrow read of that is actually appropriate. It depends on how expanded that read is, or to what degree that is. And so I understand what you're saying, but I think, again, this is why you have to read media on all sides, because you get an overblown view either way. If you just listen to right-wing media, you would get an overblown view of how awful Biden is. And if you just listen to mainstream, which is mostly left-wing media in the United States, you get an overblown view of SCOTUS or Trump or whatever else. So you have to triangulate. I've been saying that since first earliest videos that I was doing here on Ukraine. Okay, Sky Denali says, Professor, what would Trump have to say to earn your vote, if that's even possible at this point? Wow. He'd have to repent, which he's not going to do. I mean, repent of that direction that he's brought us. But I don't know that he could repent and actually prove it between now and the election. That's a hard thing. And then move us back politically to not what he was, repent for the damage he's caused. I don't know how he could get there. And if he did what I would want him to do, he would lose much of his base that just wants him to kick the teeth in of the other side. So remember, the populists follow him. Like when Trump says something nutty, and I showed a video, I don't remember when it was, but of something that I showed in class of, there was an article in Critical Sociology of charisma meeting populism, and you put those two together, and that's where Trump is, right? He's a reasonably charismatic guy. You might not think that if you're on the other side, but if you're on the people that he appeals to, and meeting populism. And these people feel down, they feel overlooked, they feel like they're the losers of society right now, as we've shifted from, taking care of, like their factory jobs have gone away, let's say, and I'm oversimplifying, right? But factory jobs have gone away. Identity politics means that they're bad just because they're a white male, let's say. And they want him to go kick in the teeth of the system that's doing this to them. Like I'm oversimplifying this, but that's basically what's going on. Okay. So do you think, I don't know if I questioned that or answered that question fully. Okay. So do you think that you should replace Biden on the So who do you think should replace Biden on the Democratic ticket? That's for Democrats to decide. I don't know. I think that a moderate Democrat could walk away with this election. I mean, you put somebody in there that is least repulsive to, like, so this is kind of what happened in Britain, right? Keir Starmer. I'm trying to remember the name of the British politician from the Labour Party that just devastated the party in the previous election that Starmer kind of pushed aside. But Keir kind of ran as more of a moderate. On the left, the Labour, the Liberals, the Green kind of held their nose and all voted for him because he's far better to their minds than was the Conservatives on the right. And so I think that's the model. Okay. In Europe, German-speaking parts, especially in the domain of conservatives, scared of disappearing from my point of view. I don't know what you're asking. Okay, just a couple more questions I'll answer, and then we'll be done. So, Dr. Gerdes, do you listen to the opinions of former Justice Judge Luttig? I always wait for his opinion because he's old school conservative. And the name rings a bell, but it's not something that I track down. I could even be confusing him with someone, but it's not like a source that I would go to directly. It might be something I've read somewhere over along the way. Mark Davis might fit the bill. I don't know how acceptable he'll be. I don't know. Victor says, Darren, I'm far left and I actively listen to you. I greatly respect and admire you. Believe it or not, I've voted for some GOP, Snow, Cohen over the years. Not all of us are stuck in magical thinking. I'm not saying that the left is stuck in magical thinking. I'm saying that both sides have a worldview, left or right, that will confound the way that they see things. So we have to understand reality. We need to try to understand the other side as much as possible, and that could make us more convinced of our position, or it could change our position, or whatever. But you have to understand. You got to listen. Be humble and just listen. That reminds me of something that I'm looking for right now that Vlad posted yesterday, and I bookmarked it. I liked it. Where is it? About listening to the other side. He quoted someone. Come on, why can't I find this now? Okay, here it is. Those who don't know how to listen are, in general, unable to be just. This was said by Alistair McIntyre. Let me say that again. Those who don't know how to listen are, in general, unable to be just. That's a powerful statement, and I think he's right. So listen to the other side. Hear what they have to say. That doesn't mean that they're right. Doesn't mean that you're right. Just listen and try to work through what's going on. But now you have to do the hard work. You can't just repeat the other side or repeat talking points from your side and say the other side's bad. Okay, Professor Gerdes, I had to talk about the phrase identity politics, as it means different things in different areas. In Europe, it's the extreme right who call themselves even identary. I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Okay. You can't compare European countries in the U.S. With the U.S., we typically have many more parties. Yeah, I understand that. And your two-party system makes it very different. And you have to play the game in each country. That's right. You do have to play the game for each country. You could never vote for Biden. That tells me all I need to know. Well, okay. And you can judge me how you want to judge me, but I think it's a more nuanced position, and most of my viewers will think that as well. Okay. With that, unless there's other questions, we'll wrap up because it's already an hour and a half into it, and one more just popped up. This will be the very last one. That's why I mentioned actively listen to you last night. I tried to explain to my Dem mom about the disaffected people on the right and not to demonize them. We must listen to each other. That's exactly right. We got to listen to each other and try to understand where others are coming from. I think if you listen to and read the media, you'll see a very different experience than what you run into in the supermarket. And the supermarket is the reality on the ground. And Okay, with that, let me end there. Thank you for your time, folks. I really do appreciate all the questions that you had and that we largely stayed on track. I hope this was profitable for you. Thank you very much. Talk to you another time. Bye-bye.